joins us. He sits on the Senate Armed Services Committee. Senator, welcome. Do you fear or think that the IDF withdrawal that came as a surprise overnight, do you think that's a reaction to the White House and to some Democrats who are calling for an end to the transfer of arms to Israel?
You know, I haven't spoken with IDF. We have a pretty good relationship with them. I would say probably so. You know, when you have the President of the United States putting pressure on them, which I don't think he should. As I've said this before, Eric, no one told us what we should and shouldn't do after 9/11. We went after the terrorist organization that attacked us, and we went wherever we thought they were at. Hamas attacked Israel, and they should have the right to do whatever they had to do to eliminate, not to stop the threat, to eliminate the threat so it doesn't happen again. And unfortunately, Biden has now weighed in on it, has put pressure on Israel, and we're a strong ally of them. They get a lot of their military supplies, a lot of their munitions through us, and I believe that's probably played a role here, unfortunately.
Yeah, you know, there are a lot of calls, of course, for a ceasefire, and of course, everyone wants to see this the atrocities end. But at the same time, how come there are not more calls for a Hamas ceasefire, for Hamas to surrender, to put the onus on Hamas and not on Jerusalem?
Eric, that's exactly right. Hamas is the terrorist organization that is sponsored by Iran. And Qatar could put a lot of pressure on Hamas to lay down their arms and walk away, to surrender completely. It's not on the IDF. It's not on Israel, which IDF, by the way, for our listeners, is Israel's Defense Force. That's what IDF stands for. It's not on them to ceasefire. As I said, they didn't start this fight. They didn't start the fight on October 7th. That was Hamas. But it is up to Israel, it's up to the IDF to eliminate the threat, the same as we eliminated Osama bin Laden after 9/11. We need to be standing with them to do the same. They need to go after the head. They need to go after the leadership of Hamas. And Qatar could help with that because we know where a lot of them are getting their financing, where a lot of their financing is coming from, and where they live. And we should be calling on Hamas to walk away, not Israel.
Well, what could Qatar do? I mean, look, they support Hamas. The billionaire leaders of Hamas are sitting there in their apartments and hotels in Qatar. How come the Arab states don't get together and say, enough of this? We're not supporting you. Get out, stop this, and rebuild Gaza and help the people of Gaza as they should have been helped, and not by the terrorists of Hamas?
I believe Qatar could play a really pivotal role in that. You got to understand, too, Qatar lives in a very dangerous neighborhood, and they're doing the best they can to play the piano, as I would say, meaning that they're trying to appease all sides. At some point, that falls away, and at some point, too, you got to pick sides. And in this case, I believe they need to learn to stand with the United States. And if the United States was standing strong with Israel, then Qatar would have more ability to push back on Hamas. There's no way, though, Qatar could push back on Hamas alone with Israel's pressure. That dynamic in the Middle East is just not strong enough for Qatar to be able to afford to do that. But if the United States demanded for Qatar to do that, without question, Qatar could stand on their own and tell Hamas's leaders to get out and turn them over or go to another country. But unfortunately, we have a very weak president, Eric, and Biden is trying to once again figure out how to appease people rather than standing strong. And what I mean by that is we know where the funding from Hamas comes from. It comes from Iran. If President Biden and his administration wasn't so actively trying to appease Iran, then we would be able to put a lot more pressure on Hamas and stand with our strongest ally in the Middle East, which is Israel.
Yeah, here's John Kirby talking about, well, the White House has said they're putting pressure on Hamas to give up. I don't see Hamas listening to the White House on that. Here's John Kirby on what they're doing. To take a moment.
What we will do is make sure that they have the tools and capabilities they need to defend themselves. And what we will also do, and the president made this clear, is hold Israel accountable for the way in which they're conducting these operations. You can be a good friend of Israel, as we are, and helping them defend themselves, at the same time holding them to an appropriate standard of accountability and effectiveness from a military perspective where they are protecting civilians.
Finally, what should John Kirby in the White House say? We support Israel.
He should be saying we're going to hold Hamas accountable for the civilian shields that they're using to fight their war. We shouldn't be talking about holding Israel accountable. Hold Hamas accountable. You know, the aid that is already going in, that the White House, without the direction of Congress, without the support of us at all, they have delivered aid in there. Do you realize a lot of those aid packages are already ending up on the street markets in Egypt, which means that they can smuggle stuff out of Hamas. They can smuggle stuff in. So our aid is now funding Hamas. Why aren't we holding Hamas accountable? That conversation was so backwards. Instead of directing your comments to Israel and the IDF, it all should have went to the terrorist organization, and by ways they should be mentioning Iran along the way.
Hamas was the perpetrator.
Well, Hamas and what I say, Iran. I'm sorry. Should be holding Hamas accountable and mentioning Iran, because Iran is sponsoring Hamas.
Iran.
Thanks for catching that, Eric.
Of course, Iran and Hamas, the threat. Senator Mark Wayne Mullin.
Right.
Good to see you, Senator. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, sir.
And we'll have more news right after this.